Ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prusha.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Define the Fight on this bright, sunny Monday morning. We'll take it. The sun is good, life is good, and you know what? I couldn't be more honored than to have definitely a standout individual who has not only served our country, but continues to serve and lead through a heart-centered space, building warriors left and right within the workplace and in his family and in life. Jason Gardner is a former U.S. Navy SEAL, combat leader, and now a leadership instructor and speaker with Echelon Front. He has served, you guys, for nearly 3 decades in the SEAL teams. But not only that, he was a frontline SEAL sniper to the SEAL Team 5, the SEAL Team 5 Command Master Chief. And, you know, I had the opportunity to meet Jason not too long ago. And just his focus, the way that he carries himself, it was such a pleasure. I gravitate so much to individuals' energies with high frequency and an indomitable will to persevere no matter what steps you're at in life. So, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mariah. Good morning.
You know, is it sunny where you're at?
It is. It's really nice. Spring just arrived 2 days ago, and we've got 70-degree weather, and it's gorgeous outside.
Hey, you can start sprinkling that towards North Dakota anytime. We were in the 60s last week, and then all of a sudden we took a nosedive into the 18s. So, you know, hey, it's the nature of the beast. We'll roll with it. So,
Yeah.
So Jason, you know, I had, like I said, the opportunity to meet with you and Steve and Rebecca, introduced all of us together. And it's such a pleasure. I went through in 2021, going through different crucibles and learning more about the mindset and the focus and breath work that it takes to be a Navy SEAL. Clearly, I've never been a Navy SEAL, but your experiences, I'm really excited for individuals to hear, because it does. It takes so much. I mean, you guys are pushing through mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally on all pillars. So, you know, let's talk about how your journey started and why you wanted to pursue going into the Navy SEALs.
So, my dad was in the Marine Corps, and so I grew up on Marine Corps bases and in and around the military. And I was 7 years old, because I've always been really interested in nature and science and animals and the outdoors and stuff like that, and thought that I would, you know, get a degree in life sciences or biology and do something outside. But then I also really was gravitating. I felt this pull towards joining the military. And I can remember like it's yesterday. I was 7 years old, and I said, no, I'm going to do the military thing first, and then later on move on to something else. So junior year of high school, I started talking to recruiters. I talked to the Marine Corps recruiter. My dad was still active duty Marines at the time, and he told me, don't join the Marine Corps. And I was like, why would I not want to join the Marine Corps? And he says, listen, the Marine Corps' facilities, they're the worst of the worst. He understood the draw to the Marine Corps, but he said that, you know, you want to go join the Marine Corps and be a reconnaissance Marine or be in Force Recon. And the reality is, at the time, it wasn't closed loop. So what that means is I could go do that for a little while, but then I would have to go do something else in the Marine Corps. And he says, you're going to hate it. So he told me you should think about the SEAL teams, because if you go in the Navy and join the SEAL teams, you can stay there for your whole career. And there weren't movies. There was just a couple books, and I hadn't read any of them at the time. But I did have, was taking martial arts, and one of my instructors was a SEAL in Vietnam. And so, and he was super impressive. And so I started looking into what the SEAL teams did and found out, you know, hey, these are the nation's premier maritime force for special operations. And swimming, I swam and played water polo. I was a lifeguard at the beach because I grew up on the coast there. And so it just seemed like the perfect fit So I locked onto that and just decided that that's what I was going to do. So I joined the Navy. They didn't have, well, they had a contract that could guarantee that I went to BUD/S, but it was filled up. So they'd met their quota and they weren't allowing other people to take it. So I took a big gamble and just joined the Navy and took a source rating, which was gunner's mate, in hopes that I would be able to go to the SEAL teams from there. And you do a screening test in boot camp, which is a run and a swim and a bunch of pull-ups and stuff like that to see if you physically have what it takes to join the teams. And I did that. I passed that because I already knew what the test was and I was training to it before I joined. And so then I went to boot camp. I passed the test, and then I went to A school, which taught me my trade in the Navy, which was gunner's mate. And then after that, I got orders to basic underwater demolition / SEAL training, and was able to go essentially straight there. So, I think boot camp is maybe 6 weeks long, maybe 2 months. And then I did 6 months of A school. And then after that, I went out to San Diego, California to Coronado and classed up and went through BUD/S, basic underwater demolition SEAL training with class 155, graduated that in 1988, December. And for those of you who don't know, basic underwater demolition SEAL training is really, really, really difficult. It's brutal. It's 6 months long. And at any point, you can just say, you know what, I don't want to do this and quit. And there's a 70% attrition rate. So of all the people that make it to the front door of BUD/S, and the attrition rate's higher for all those that want to be SEALs, but those that make it to the front door of BUD/S, 70% of them aren't going to make it through. So there's that. And it is extremely difficult. You are essentially cold and tired for the entire 6 months. And that aspect of any time you can just say, you know what, I'm done and quit. That's hard. That's hard when you've been up for 2 days or 3 days straight, because during our Hell Week, which is only the 5th week of training, but we go a whole week with 5 hours sleep for the entire week. That's all you're getting is 5 hours sleep. And you're not really getting your first nap until about 3 days into it. And you're just up for 24 hours going from one cold, wet, miserable evolution to another one. And people are quitting along the way. And so that's a big one. And then later on in training, because that's, like I said, it's 6 months long. That's only the 5th week. You are now expected to perform complex things while you're cold, tired, and hungry. And that's where we get more attrition.
I was looking at like the 1 second rule for the Navy SEALs, not to interrupt you, Jason.
Yeah.
Did they implement that in right away? Is that in the very first phase? Because clearly, it's regaining control of your thoughts, your emotions, everything like that. So when you're going through BUD/S, is that implemented before or is it after you make it?
So I'm not completely familiar. Could you explain that rule? Because I think it was called something else when I went through.
Basically, it's to regain control of your thoughts, emotions, actions when faced with painful or extreme scenarios. So it might have been phased something different.
In the late 80s, I don't think that had been really articulated to us. They did spend a lot of time with different psychologists talking to us about different mindsets we could use and things like that. But at the end of the day, the instructors were just saying, hey, suck it up or get out. And the instructors at the time took pride in how many students they could get to quit. And that's a good thing, I think, because they're the gatekeepers for who makes it through. What's really interesting is that I don't think that, what it takes to be a SEAL is completely captured in who you are. Because I know guys that had come through training, quit, gone out to the Navy, spent 2 years in the fleet, came back, and the second time through, made it through, didn't quit, and were some of the best SEALs that you ever met. So super interesting. But no, they didn't teach us that when I was going through training. They were actually, the SEALs were beginning to grow right then, and so there wasn't a lot of thought back in the 80s on how to get more people to pass.
Well, and as things change, you start implementing different things in regards to, what is working, what isn't working. You're adapting and pivoting how you need to. We were speaking in regards to what it takes to become a Navy SEAL and what BUDS training all entails. So, Jason, you've been there, you've done that, and you clearly knocked it out of the park. But what most people don't recognize is I'm sure there were some, meetings of like the darkness trying to, creep in during that time, and you had to overcome those with, like you said, 5 hours of sleep. So let's dive into BUDS and what it all entails.
So BUDS is basic underwater demolition training. It's broken into 3 phases. First phase is basically just a punishment phase. It's running, it's swimming, it's trying to weed out anyone who can't deal with the immense stress that they've got, that it takes to be a SEAL. And then second phase, when I went through training, was dive training, and third phase was a land warfare training. They've now flipped it to where dive training is a third phase. So the dive training, you learn to dive a scuba gear, which is regular tank with bottles. And then once you pass that, you go through something called pool comp, which is really, really difficult. You swim back and forth on the bottom of a pool with your scuba tanks on, and the instructors will come down and they'll rip your mask off, rip your fins off, shake you around. Then they'll take your regulator out of your mouth and tie it in knots. And then you have to remain calm and follow procedures and try to get the knots undone. And eventually they'll put a knot in there that you can't get out. And there's a procedure you follow to ditch your gear, put it on the bottom of the pool, and then come to the surface in a controlled fashion. And that is really, really difficult for a lot of people. And that's another big attrition point, is that pool comp. And then after that, we start diving a rebreather rig, which doesn't send any bubbles out, because obviously if you're doing combat swimmer operations, you don't want your bubbles giving you away to the enemy. And so you learn how to dive that rig. And then after that, the third phase for me was land warfare training. And that's just learning how to do good marksmanship, explosives, using landmines, small unit tactics, and things like that. But it's just really scratching the surface. You get into the real details later on when you get to the SEAL teams. Now, from a mental standpoint, what works for people going through BUD, specifically in Hell Week, is you have to shorten your horizon time. So if you continually think about, I don't graduate for 5 months and this Hell Week thing is really hard, I can't do this, that's what's going to get you. That if you approach those obstacles from that point of view of like, hey, I'm not going to get anything until this graduation that's coming up a long ways away, that's typically what makes people break. However, when you shorten the horizon line and you say, you know what, and I would say this to self, I'm just going to make it through today. Yeah, this is horrible. I'd really like to quit. I'm really uncomfortable, but let me just make it through today, and then I'll see what's going to go, and then I'll think about it. Or it got right down during Hell Week where I just was like saying to myself, I'm just going to make it to the next meal. I'll just make it to the next meal, and then I'll decide whether or not I'm going to quit. And so, I mean, your body is capable of so much more than any of us are aware, but you really can't tap into that until you apply the correct mindset to obstacles. And the mindset where like, oh no, and you focus on the negative, oh, this is horrible, why is this happening to me, this is terrible, is not a good strategy, and it's not constructive. The constructive strategy is to say, look at the obstacle and say, okay, this is a challenge. I wonder how I'm going to figure out. I wonder how I'm going to navigate it. And you know what? Maybe this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm just going to make it to that next meal. Or maybe I'm just going to make it. I'm just going to get that next step on this run done.
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to, it applies to so many areas in life. Everybody's looking for the future and they're not being in the present. And let's just say if somebody's training for a marathon, if they're training for a fight, you have to be present in that moment on how you're going to proceed for your training. Now, I know for you, going into the buds, how did you actually train and prepare for some of the things that, clearly you're not going to have all of the different equipment prepared for you. So there must have been different things that you did personally to be like, okay, I need to set myself up as best as I possibly can for success. And what are those actions that I need to do on a daily basis?
So one of the things, so I had no idea what to do, what to train for. I was just taking a wild guess at what I could do to prepare. And they do a fairly good job of, when you get to the selection, you're there for like a month before you actually class up, of getting you calisthenic, doing the different exercises you need to do. But what I did know was that you're going to have to do all the runs in boots. So I went down to the Army Navy surplus store, bought a set of jungle boots, and started doing beach runs in jungle boots, and started doing lots of ocean swims, which I was already accustomed to being a lifeguard. And then I was also doing things like taking cold showers, just getting accustomed to being miserable. And I think that aspect of it helped. What I didn't do enough of is I didn't do enough running, because I don't like running. And so I really, really suffered through the first part of buds until I got in good running shape and good running form, where I was just barely passing all the timed runs. And by barely passing, like when I came across the finish line, I would puke because I gave everything I had. And then I was, just like 15 seconds in front of failing the run. And if you fail 2 timed evolutions, you go to an administrative board and you can be dropped from training. So it's not good. So that's one thing that I should have done more of. But the other things that I did mentally was like just got used to running in boots, and got started doing the cold exposure.
And the cold exposure is great. So I take cold showers every single morning. It's amazing on how much it alerts your body. It gets you prepared for the day. And, I do it after a workout. I don't do it before. I like it after because my workout wakes me up in the morning. I don't know if you do the same.
So apparently the data indicates that you're better off doing the cold exposure before you work out. So it's the first thing I do. I do it every other day so that I don't get, I guess, conditioned to the cold. But I've got a stock tank outside that I get up in the morning, go outside, hop in that thing for 3 minutes, and then I do a calisthenic routine to warm myself back up after that.
Yeah, it's amazing though. Once you expose yourself to cold therapy, right? It's amazing on how much it does help with your breath work. It helps with your mind, and it just really sets your day forward, because a lot of people sometimes just wing it in the morning. Oh, I'm going to roll out of bed. I might be late. I'm going to hit my snooze and then just go through actions instead of setting up a morning ritual and then a PM ritual or a debriefing of the day on where they can improve. But, we're going to go into a break, Jason. But what I want to let you know is I want to talk a little bit more about your experiences. So, being a sniper, clearly mentally, all of the different things that go with it, but then also the chapters that follow. Now, you were also the recipient of a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and numerous other awards. So clearly, you dedicated so much more to our country. And I can't state enough how much that I appreciate you for your acts of service. And I know that doesn't come without different things as well, right? When you're putting forth all your effort.
Yeah.
And we are going to be diving into the trenches with some stories that Jason Gardner has. And he let me know that it's a little bit longer, but you know what? That's great. That just means it's a good story to share. So Jason, I'm going to just let you dive right in and sharing some of your experiences.
Okay, so I've got 5 combat deployments. First Gulf War, Somalia. Second time we invaded Iraq. And then, well, I guess we didn't really invade them. We just pushed them out of Kuwait first time. Second time of Iraq, Afghanistan, and then Iraq again. So this story is from that deployment to Afghanistan. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2009, and I was a SEAL Task Unit Senior Chief. So what that means is a SEAL Task Unit is 2 SEAL platoons working together, and I was the senior enlisted guy and the tactical lead in that task unit. That 2009 deployment to Afghanistan, of all of my combat deployments, was by far and away the most violent. We had 340 hours total of troops in contact. That means under fire on that deployment. Our longest firefight was 4 days long. And the story, one of these stories I'm about to tell is from later in that deployment. So it was, I think, our 19th or 20th operation when we were there. And it was like about 3/4 of the way through September. And so we're starting to get towards the end of the fighting season in Afghanistan. Now, up until this point on this operation, every time we got in a firefight with the Taliban, we did the meat stomp on them. We had better weapons, we had better training, we had night vision, we had air support. And so we were crushing them. And now what does that mean? Well, when you begin to win, when you begin to do good, unless you're super humble, which we weren't, you start to get complacent. And we started to get, we had become complacent because we were just winning every time. And the level of complacency is actually going to be a little shocking when I describe it. So on this operation, there was a Taliban village in the mountains north of Kandahar. And in that village, our intelligence told us that there was a Taliban commander was living in these 2 compounds. And the village is nestled in the mountains, so it's nestled right in between these 2 main ridge lines. And then there's the village at the bottom, and on the edge of that village is the 2 compounds where this Taliban commander is living. And just outside of his compound, there's like this little foothill that then goes into the ridge lines that's in the mountains. So we get dropped off by helicopters on the other side of one of those ridge lines, and it takes us, and we get dropped off around 11 o'clock at night on the other side of the ridge line. It takes us, and it's my whole SEAL task unit and a platoon of Afghan commandos all night to get up and over the ridge line, come down, and then we grab that little hilltop that was on the edge of the village right next to the Taliban commanders' compounds. So, you know, you want to get that dominating terrain feature, that high ground. So he left a group of folks up on that high ground, which I was in that element. And then our assault force went down and cleared the 2 compounds where the Taliban commander was supposed to be living. And at this point, we'd gotten really good at compound clearance. Our guys, within 10 minutes of them going over the wall and starting to clearance on the compound, call back over the radio with the pro word jackpot. That means, hey, we got the bad guy that we were after. And not only did they get the bad guy, so the Taliban commander, they got him. They found and they captured him. They found a false wall down there in the compounds and found a couple of laptop computers, some Iridium sat phones, several passports, in this guy's name. So it was just a treasure trove of intelligence that we got. Not only that, they found a huge cache of weapons and explosives. Cool. All right, now, compounds in Afghanistan have a 10-foot wall around them. All of them are walled like that. And so since they're walled up, the problem is if you're inside those compounds, and we were going to remain there over day, so we were going to be in those two compounds and on that hilltop for a full cycle of daylight before we extracted. And our guys, now to be able to see out if you're getting attacked, they started building fighting positions on the rooftops of those compounds. And up on that hilltop, we started making ourselves a fighting position too. And so we spent the rest of the night, as waiting for the sun to come up, building our fighting positions. And up on that hilltop, we weren't able to fill sandbags, so we had to move boulders around and made ourselves a really janky fighting, wall about maybe mid-thigh high if you were standing up. Sun came up, all the women and children left the village. And the Taliban always did this. This was my experience with them. They always got their non-combatants out of the way. So what would happen if it was a bad area? You go in there, you hold a compound or a bazaar or something, and the sun comes up, women and children all leave. As soon as that last family is out of the way, then the Taliban would bring the fight. That's when the heavy machine gun fire would start, your rocket-propelled grenades. Well, in this case, the women and children all leave, and nothing happens. And we can pick out a couple people like peeking behind walls and seeing, looking at us. And what they were doing was, these guys were smarter. They didn't attack us right away when they didn't know where we were at. So they spent about 40 minutes figuring out which compounds we were in and what high ground we had. And then they all, about half of them, I think, snuck out of the village because a bunch of them remained in the village. Half of them snuck out and went out and around and up and started getting on these two main ridge lines, which now surrounded us. And that's the tricky thing about fighting in the mountains, is you can grab one piece of high ground and somebody else could grab all the high ground around you. And then they also started bringing fighters in from other villages to push up to these two ridge lines surrounding us. Around 10 a.m., we see a Taliban fighter with a PKM, and a PKM is a big belt-fed machine gun, and he's pushing it out onto this flat piece of rock, and he's on one of the ridge lines. He's about 1,200 yards from the fighting position I was on at the hilltop. So we shot at him with a 300 Win Mag sniper rifle, and 1,200 yards is a long shot for a 300 Win Mag, and there was about a 15-mile-an-hour wind blowing, and so that makes it even more difficult. And we missed him. We wound up hitting right by his bipods of his machine guns, and the guy takes his machine gun and he goes back and he hides behind the rocks or whatever else what he was behind. So what we didn't know at the time, but this same thing is playing out in at least 5 other fighting positions up on these hilltops. There was estimated 80 fighters up there. And they're all pushing into little spots where they can open up on us. So he goes away for like 15 minutes, pops back out again, starts moving back into his fighting position again. We shoot at him again. We miss him again, just barely. He goes back and hides again. Now it's about 10:15. And it's starting to get hot. It's September. It's late September in Afghanistan. And about 10:15 in the morning, I think we were up around 95 degrees. And the first lazy, complacent, stupid thing that we did was we all took off our helmets. Because it's hot. It's uncomfortable. And I can remember rationalizing it. Well, hey, I got this nice rock wall I'm behind. I'm good. So shoot at him again, miss him again. He hides again. Now it's like 10:45, and now we're over 100 degrees. And the next lazy, complacent thing we all did was we took off our body armor. It's embarrassing to say it right now. We're shooting at a guy with a machine gun, and we think it's okay because we have a little rock wall that we're hiding behind to take off our body armor because we're a little uncomfortable. So about half an hour after that, so it's about 11:15 maybe now, we get hit all at the same time. Every one of those fighting positions light us up with a massive barrage of rocket-propelled grenades. It's like rocket-propelled grenades are just falling out of the sky. And thank goodness they weren't good aim with them, because they were impacting all around our fighting position. None of them landed in the fighting position, but I'm laying flat out on my belly, and the pebbles and the gravel on the ground are bouncing up and hitting me in the face from the impact and the concussion of these rocket-propelled grenades. Now, luckily, I am right where I took off my body armor, my helmet, so I snake my way back into my body armor. I get my helmet on my head. I grab my rifle, and I get ready to get over that rock wall to shoot back. And I look up at it, and I'm laying flat on my belly, and I can see the rock wall physically eroding under the impact of the bullets. Because now there's a steady stream of machine gun fire, because they've got 5 or 6 heavy machine guns, and they're just hosing us down with bullets. No one can get up. And I'll tell you what, I would no sooner put my face into a table saw than I was putting my face up over that rock wall to shoot back, because you just get shot immediately. So I'm laying there, and then I can hear a series of explosions. The compounds that our guys had cleared, they're 80 yards down the hill from where I'm at. And I can hear this boom, 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 and then a big boom, and then another big boom, and I'm thinking in my head, they're getting overrun. They're getting overrun down there. And then the thought went through my head, okay, I've lived by the sword, and today I'm going to die by it. And this sucks. So now what was happening down there below in the compounds, and I found this out later, was just like us, they were taking overwhelming effective fire. They had to abandon those rooftop positions they built, and now they're down inside their compounds and they can't see out. And so the Taliban that was hidden down in the village was able to get close enough to them to where they could lob grenades over the compound walls in with our guys. And so what our guys had to do down there was they used our breaching charges that we have, built to blow through compound walls, and they put their breaching charges up on the compound walls to blow holes through the walls so they could see out to shoot at the Taliban and keep them back. So those big explosions actually were our guys using those big explosions to detonate the compound walls and all that. I am laying there face to face with our Joint Tactical Air Controller, Henry Berkowitz, who is the SEAL that talks to the aircraft that we have overhead and tells them where to drop their bombs. Well, we've got one aircraft overhead, and it's a Predator. A Predator is a drone. It's a UAV. So the pilot isn't in the aircraft. It's somewhere else. And they're looking at the battlefield through a thermal image from 30,000 feet. And here's the thing. Thermal imagers don't work all that great when it's super hot out and the rocks are the same temperature as people. And it's not really able to pick out any of the fighters, and all it has on its wings is one Hellfire missile, and that isn't enough ordnance to solve the problems that we've got going on right there. We communicate up via the SATCOMs to our leadership that we're taking overwhelming effective fire, and at this rate, it looks like we're going to get overrun. And what that does is it means everything changes, and every aircraft in Afghanistan at the time stopped whatever they were doing somewhere else, and they were all coming as fast as they could to our positions. Because at this point I thought I was going to die, and it's really difficult to give you a good aspect of time, but I think it took about 10 to 15 minutes before the first manned aircraft checked on station. And the first manned aircraft to check on station were a couple of French Mirages. And it's a coalition fight. There's all kinds of other countries there. So the French pilots check in with Henry, and I'm listening to this all over the radio comms, and they check in and they go, where do you want us to drop our bombs? And Henry's like, hey, listen, I can't tell you where to drop your bombs because we can't put our heads up to see. Will you do a show of force over these two main ridge lines? Because we know that the fighting positions are on these two main ridge lines, but we don't know where they're at. Okay, so what's a show of force? A show of force is where our aircraft or aircraft will fly as low as they're willing to fly over the enemy's heads. And the pilots don't have to do this, because to do a show of force, they are putting themselves at significant risk. Up at 30,000 feet, the Taliban doesn't have a dang thing that can hit them. But when they come down and fly low over their heads, they get lucky with a good rocket-propelled grenade, that airburst or some small on fire or a heat-seeking shoulder-fired missile. They can take them out. And like I said, the pilots don't have to do this. And there are times where they're like, yeah, we're not doing that. So we don't hear anything from those two French pilots for about 2 minutes. And then they break squelch. They come back over the radio, and we hear this. We hear, oh, stand by, Americans. Here we come. And they just come ripping over those two ridge lines. These guys are flying so low that their aircraft are kicking off their countermeasures. And what the countermeasures are is they're flares that the aircraft kick off to confuse any heat-seeking missiles that the enemy might have. And it's incredible. If you've ever been to an air show, or if you watch that movie, Top Gun Maverick, you've got a good mental image of what this looks like. These two aircraft just screaming over the enemy's heads. Well, the Taliban, they hate our aircraft like you would if you were them. And when these French pilots come ripping over their heads, they all took cover. They're like, oh no, these flares are popping out. They don't know what those are. So they all sink, they take cover. And what does that mean? They stop shooting at us for about 2 minutes. And so now I can get my head up over that rock wall and start shooting back. And all of us are now shooting back. And we remember where that one guy was earlier, and we could see other fighting positions. And now it's an even fight. We're laying fire into their fighting positions, and it's an even fight. It's not apparent that we're going to get overrun. Our guys down in the compounds have got a 60-millimeter mortar set up. They've got people back up on the rooftop positions, and they're just pumping mortar rounds out as fast as they can. Machine guns, sniper fire. We are bringing all the weapons that we have to bear against the Taliban. And it's an even fight. But we are 40 kilometers from the nearest forward operating base. And so what that means is it's about 4 hours before any backup or reaction force to get in to back us up. And at the rate we're going through ammo, we don't have 4 hours worth of ammo left. And so we're shooting, the fight's going well. And then about 10, 15 minutes later, you know, as I'm doing a magazine change and I'm checking, I'm like, okay, great. I've got just a few magazines left. How's this going to work out? The next aircraft to check on station was a B-1 bomber. Ladies and gentlemen, B-1 bombers have bombs to waste. And I can remember it yesterday when Henry was talking to that pilot or whoever he was talking to on that B-1 bomber, and she sounded like an angel when she says, I'm going to drop 4,000 pounds of ordnance for you. Because we explained that what the situation we had, the fighting positions on the ridge line. And she says, I'm going to give you 8 500-pound bombs. We're going to put 4 on each ridge line. We're going to set them to air burst 50 meters above the deck. And we're going to spread them out 100 meters apart down each ridge line. And she said all this as coolly and calmly as if she was saying, hey, I'm going to Starbucks. Do you want that latte you always get? And so a 500-pound bomb air bursting 50 meters above your head is catastrophic. 4 of them air bursting over your ridge line spread out 100 meters apart is cataclysmic. And the B-1 bomber can do that all at the same time. So there's a slight pause to where the aircraft can get to a spot, release all the bombs, and then they all fly to where they got to go. We hear over the radio, weapons release, impact in 30 seconds. We get a 10-second countdown over the radio, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. 8 bombs, 4 over each ridgeline, air bursting all at the same time. It was like the most awesome 4th of July grand finale I had ever seen. Obviously, I had a lot of emotionally involved in that strike, and everybody cheered. We were like, yeah! Except for the Taliban.
Well, the Taliban shouldn't be cheering.
No, because we killed or wounded half of the ones that came out to fight us that day.
You know, and Jason,
are we at a break?
Well, what I want to say is this: is you definitely defined the fight, and I couldn't imagine not knowing what was happening or going through that when you're like, okay, this could be my last breath. It might not be, but the fact that you guys put it together, and then it just demonstrates the fact of a team, that everybody needed to have all hands on deck to be successful in that fight. Now, we are actually, we have to wrap up today, but what I want to say is this. You're an unbelievable individual, and I know that with Echelon Front, we didn't have an opportunity to dive in, but what is one last thing that you would want to say to somebody in regards to a quote or into a mindset moving forward in 2024?
The mindset I want you to have in 2024 is one of extreme ownership. And here's the deal. The only person you can control is you.
You got it.
So any problem that you face, don't cast blame. Don't make excuses. Just figure out something squared away that you can do to fix that problem. Think about, hey, what kind of mindset should I have? And if you do that, then your life is going to be so much easier and so much better. Sure, you're going to encounter obstacles, and those obstacles are all opportunities for you to navigate and challenge those obstacles, because that's what life is. We're all pushing a boulder uphill. And you know what pushing a boulder uphill is? You're stealing a workout. It's leg day for free. So enjoy the thing, take ownership,
and push the boulder.
Always think of something in the way that you can do, and push that boulder.
You got it. Well, Jason, you know what? You have so many stories. I can't wait to connect after the show. But thank you so much for being on Define the Fight, and continue to win the fight and help others overcome theirs as well. So thank you again for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Mariah.
You bet. You take care.
See you, everybody.